All right. Well, I have this going. I think I'll wait a little bit before I get into the nitty-gritty of everything. But we're on the Gaheris server right now. Just waiting to get this podcast started. We're in front of, I believe this is Mjolnir Fast. It is guarded by many Jotuns, and they are protecting their king Thrimson, who has taken control of Thor's hammer. I've killed this guy a few times in streams before, and basically you just kill that guy, then destroy the hammer of Thor, since no one should have that much power. And it's a pretty cool item you get from it. It has a 2000 damage melee ablative. But anyway, I'm joined by Mark. I think he stepped away for a minute, but he'll be joining me for this podcast as well, and Obelisk might join us later. So, I have a few things to talk about. One of the... oh, I'm getting dinged in IRC. Oh, that's not important. Okay, anyway. One of the things that I thought I would mention is that a new newsletter is coming out. So if you're not signed up already, definitely sign up for that. I believe in future newsletters, maybe even the newsletter that's coming this week, there'll be some in-game goodies you can get if you're signed up for the newsletter. So if you haven't done that already, it's probably a good idea to do that. You get all sorts of cool information and maybe some in-game stuff as well. So if you just go to darkageofcamelot.com, you can get yourself signed up. Oh, Baben's saying something. Not yet.
Nothing quite like being totally thwarted in your opening salvo.
Oh, I know. So the newsletter isn't coming this week? Was I thinking of something else? Well, I hope I didn't psych some people out.
Like, I should say that not many people realize this, but Beeps actually supervises us from the bar, so
Yeah.
sometimes
Okay,
it's
so
slow in coming. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
the newsletter is coming out, but the rewards aren't coming out until roughly the end of May, which is when the new account center is hopefully going to be implemented. Okay, sorry, I got my timeline a little messed up. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, so yeah, definitely sign up for the newsletter. New one coming this week. There's also another thing coming up this week, which is the application form for people to sign up to be a knight or just to contribute to the internal forums. And it's nothing too intensive, really, as far as I know. Have you looked at the application, Mark?
I have, yeah. It's actually, I think it's pretty well done. Kudos. Um, It reminds me a bit of the team lead applications we used to have to do back in the day when I applied. And the impetus was on the player to say, hey, this is who I am and what I want to do, and as far as helping out, these are my strengths, and I don't know, I like it. I think it's well done. I can't wait to see it go live.
Hmm. Well, there's I don't know. Do you think we should give some teaser questions that it has?
I think it could be fun. I could make some up too. I kid. What's your favorite part of it?
Um, I like that it's just sort of gauging what level of what level of involvement you want to have in the community. So it asks if you're willing to stream for the official channel. Are you comfortable with using voice chat with others? Just kind of things like that. Do you visit any community websites or Facebook groups or things like that? So do you go to post count? Do you go to the French forums, the German forums, and whatnot?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I also really like that there are sufficient places to be entirely honest about everything. What you like and dislike about the game right now, I think is a good step for opening things up, because I feel like a lot of times people try to give the right answer instead of an honest one when they're like, it's a test. This isn't a test. We want to know, how you really feel about the game and what you think you could better, because just like it's an established game, and there are things that we love and things that we wish we could change. So if we're able to be honest about that, I think it makes for a better conversation.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. Um, yeah, those were the couple of things that stood out the most to me. Um, yeah, um, yeah, and it also asks
Well,
what you like most about the game. Are you a solo stealther? Are you a PvEer? Do you like crafting all the time? That kind of stuff as well. So it definitely gives you an idea of sort of what might be expected of you. Like if you specialize in something, we value your opinion on everything, but we'd definitely like your expertise on things that you are particularly passionate about in particular aspects of the game.
I'm a little disappointed there's not a question in there about which race and sex of Dark Age Camelot tune makes the most annoying noise when you hit it. I think that should be in there. Yeah, I'm interested. One of the things that's kind of been undefined, um, well, not undiscussed, but undefined. We've talked about it quite a lot. Is how many different types of knights we should ultimately need. I don't personally, I don't see it going back towards a one knight for every class plus every play style, as we had for team leads back in the day. Um, but trying to figure out what's a reasonable amount of representation for every point of view. Do you have any views on that, Ian?
Well, I think that myself, out of all people, think that if there's a community for it, there should be representation for it. So, for example, the community I try to represent is probably both the Gaheris community and, to a lesser degree, the PvE community. And I agree that as a Battlegrounds player myself for a very long time, I think Battlegrounds players should have proper representation. I think soloers should have proper representation. I think battle group leaders should have proper representation. I think people who have, 8 men, pretty much anything really. I think their voices should be heard.
I agree completely, and I don't think necessarily that we need specific representation for, like, for instance, I was a warrior team lead for a time. I don't know that we need a warrior team lead and a hero team lead and an armsman team lead. I feel like we've got the general structure of the way the game works, and the differences between realms are pretty well understood. So yeah, I'd rather see new knights like you're talking about for playstyle representations rather than shooting for specific classes.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, class balance would be uh, absolute, but it always changes. It changes with different patches. It changes with new items. Changes with how people play the classes and what gets popular and what becomes obscure and whatnot. So yeah, I think that in general, in my opinion, the more important thing is playstyle more than anything.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I think you know I might have missed the first 20 seconds of your thing there. Um, I was helping fake bandage my 4-year-old's stuffed gorilla. It was important stuff. Um, but I think we should name this week's podcast the official "We Love Gaharis" and "What Can We Do About It" podcast.
Yeah, well, there was a few things that I was going to talk about that have been brought up recently, and things that I've been talking about for a long time, even before I became a knight or before I was even on the internal forums. So yeah, I think I'd say that my constant poking and prodding at everyone to take a look at Gaheris has probably paid off to a degree. There's definitely a lot more people know about it. Like for a long time, people didn't even know the server existed. So yeah, I think uh, now is a good time for things to start happening, and the population has actually been increased quite a bit from it probably a year or two ago. And I think that's partly because the European players are beginning to discover it. We have a great population of European players, German, French, Danish, and pretty much everywhere throughout Europe. There's a lot more players there. And I'd say the American uh, primetime population has been increased as well. It used to be the biggest population during its heyday, but it kind of dipped for a while, and now it's slowly coming back. And I think, like I say, that with PVE, the content is, you know, uh, the essential part to making the game interesting. And I think things like the Pictish quests and the Darkness Falls, I guess you could call it expansion. It's not really an official expansion, but a revamp anyway. That has helped quite a bit, and I really think the loot system was well done. You get a little something even if you don't win a lotto roll, and um, yeah, I think it was pretty well done. I think the rewards were definitely well thought out. But yeah, so if we just keep getting content like Darkness Falls revamp or like that Portal quest that came in, I think in 1.117C. Uh, there's a new encounter that you can do that uh, has some interesting quest rewards. They're pretty challenging and fun fights, but if we see more stuff like that, I think that will be good. Um, but I guess out of that, maybe I can segue into some of the other things I've been talking about, if you'll let me, Mark.
Oh, absolutely. I think we
um,
should pause though for a minute and, or at some point, maybe not now. Think about it, um, and kind of. I'm interested to hear what the at some point, not necessarily the second, what players' perspectives on Gaheris are about how people perceive the general population perceives Gaheris as a whole.
mhm.
Like I know it used to be like, oh, they're all just this type, and I've been surprised every time I've been over there by what people are actually like. So if you have any anecdotal stories about how Gaheris has surprised you. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we could talk about that right now. I think Gaharis has sort of evolved over the last couple of years. Um, I think Gaharis players have gotten better at the game. I don't know what happened to change that, but I remember when I first started there, we would have 50 plus man raids taking on relic encounters like you see in front of me. And, 50 plus people and they would still wipe. Whereas these days, I've seen as little as 4 or 5 man groups rolling through there and taking it out no problem. So that's one aspect. And I can't say it's solely due to skill that people are able to do this. There were some changes to certain items that made things like that possible. But even before those item changes, I was seeing, 8-mans being able to do these kinds of things as well. So that was one thing that sort of surprised me as I was playing, that we slowly got more skilled at PvE. I think maybe before that it was a lot more casual, and um, as the population had decreased, we sort of had to adapt to the smaller numbers that were available to us.
Yeah, it makes sense. So sorry, go ahead. Onto your list, man.
One of the other things that I was going to talk about that you were asking me about is Frosty Scuttlebug. Is that Carol? I think Carol's messing with me right now. It is friendly.
I thought she was drying her hair.
Well, she's currently in beetle form. Just, oh, she's scurrying off. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I think she's just messing with me, but I've never seen that before. Maybe I'm just going crazy. But anyway, I think something that people are sort of surprised by is when I don't know if you know this, but I get people set up on Gaharis all the time. Sometimes they are kind of curious or bored or whatever, and I I get them set up on Gaharis, and they actually are surprised about how addicting it can be, and how just how more laid back it is. I mean, it's laid back, but you still have this strong compulsion to play. So I think that's one thing that didn't surprise me, but it surprised a lot of people once they started playing here. But anyway, on to the list. There was 3 things on my list that have come up in the past. So, maybe a couple of years ago, and some things more recent. One of the conversations that I was recently having with people on the Gaharis.net forums is talking about the various currencies that have been introduced in the game over time. These currencies were put in place because a lot of the RVR players, the PvP players, were just sort of overwhelmed by all the PvE that was required in order to be fully competitive. And while these currencies were really great for servers like Yuan, they were added to Gaheris as well, and it sort of it pretty much removed content. When you create something that is basically an alternate version, but sort of dumbed down and maybe not as entertaining to a person who does enjoy PvE, you're essentially removing content when you add, a currency like that. And some of the people that talk to me sort of allude to the better days when that currency didn't exist. And so I brought up some polls, sort of gauging whether people think that these currencies should be removed or changed in somehow, not for the entire game, but maybe just for Gaheris only. And generally, people aren't, they're not really put off by these currencies anymore. Um, so, for example, even though Atlantean Glass removed the need to do all these different master level and artifact encounters, um, they sort of created a way of doing solo content. So it basically made it so that instead of having to be in a raid to get your master levels, you could do these various quests that would only require yourself or yourself and a friend. So a lot of people, uh, they actually like the Atlantean Glass change just for that reason. So um, I sort of proposed that it be removed, but I think a lot of people like the way it is now. And as far as Tuscarian Ice and Galadoria Roots, Sarcidi Souls, a lot of people feel that, again, it was sort of like the Atlantean Glass change, where, once it took 20, 30, 40 people to raid these dungeons to get certain items. Now you only need maybe a trio or a four-man or, a smaller group anyway to get these currencies so that you can get the higher end loot. And I think at the same time, when you do actually do a raid, you do get extra currency, which uh, makes it even more rewarding to muster up a large raid to take out all these different bosses. So the general consensus there was that it was pretty much another currency that was acceptable to the Gaharis community. And then the last one was Dragon Scales. And I think people use dragon loot so much that even if you do farm dragons, the big encounters, there's still never enough scales for for the people
Wow.
to be able to use all of them. So maybe a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, the currencies may have not been the best idea, but just because of the current population, the ability to small man all this kind of stuff has definitely fostered a more viable solo and small man experience for having worthwhile PvE content.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think Gaheris should have never received these currencies, or do you think it was sort of probably a good thing at the time just because of Gaheris's dwindling population at the time?
Well, yeah, I think it's absolutely kind of a multifaceted thing. I wasn't a fan of it at the time, but yeah, because of the smaller population, you're right. I mean, I think it did a couple things. It allowed, like you said, smaller groups to be able to accomplish things that help them be more viable. But sorry, 4-year-old. But it also went a long way towards allowing people to learn new tactics, like, I guess, if you will. Try things differently. I learned I played on the server Palamedes back in the day, and we had a significantly small mid and Hibernian population compared to the Albion population. So everything we had to do was an uphill battle. We were the first people ever to run 8-mans. I know people argue about that, but aside from that, we were also the first server to implement stealth keep takes, where you'd stick a healer and a bunch of stealthers in there, and have them climb the walls and kill the lord. We found our ways around everything, some of which were deemed acceptable, some of them weren't. But ultimately, I think we had more fun because we found ways to defy, the adversity. And I think Gaheris is probably in that place now. And you're right, maybe now it's not reasonable to remove the currency, but I see how it has removed content. I was actually super surprised and excited by the Darkness Falls content for Gaharis in general. I think they did a great job with it. It's pretty darn cool. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, if you will, free expansion in general?
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on that you were saying earlier was how the currencies helped small man solo content, but sort of hurt the end game content. I think that one thing that could eventually be done is, thanks to these currencies, it sort of opens up all these other end game encounters to maybe a revamp similar to the Darkness Falls one, where they could just revamp the rewards for the content that was originally for the master levels. Now that you have Atlantean Glass, you could just get the master levels that way and use the encounters for something completely different. So that there's always an opportunity there as well. As far as
Yeah.
the sorry, what was your question about the Darkness Falls?
Just what your thoughts were on that. I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of the PvE content in the Darkness Falls, um, event expansion, whatever you want to call it. I just was curious what you thought about that expansion specifically.
Well, I think a lot of them are fun fights. I think some of them are of appropriate difficulty, and um, I think it's kind of I don't know. There are some things that could be improved, but I think overall it was pretty well done. My pretty much my only beef with the entire thing is Legion's resistance to damage. I think the fight takes a little too long, but I think at the same time, I was talking to my guildmate after we had killed Legion a couple times. I think that the fight was about the same length as a regular old school uh, PvE encounter, where it took a ton of damage and a ton of people to take him out. And even then, when you had a 50-man raid, it still took half an hour or an hour to get him to zero health. So I think maybe we're spoiled in that regard, since uh, our usual Gaheris tactics are to bring a tank, bring a heat debuffer, and just bring a Zerg of heretics, so that the Legion encounters sort of put a kibosh on that. But it's different, and I think, like I said, maybe it's as good as we can expect, and perhaps the length of the fight, our beef with it is just sort of because we're spoiled more than anything.
It was interesting how they were trying to balance that when it first came out, because you know I tried it from all three realms, and it just seemed like, and forgive me for being a little jaded, but it seemed like Hibernia was able to just, as a whole, on the Ywain servers, was able to just tear through that encounter. Um, and it just seemed a little bit unreasonable because of all the PBOE. I don't know. It still doesn't sit right with me, that the Legion encounter. Like, I feel like it should be altered somehow. I like that there's some tactic to it, but I don't know. It just feels like it's a percentage off of the fun factor, if that makes any sense. It was, even when it was more easily rolled over, it was still, I think, more fun for the general population. Now it's like, I haven't really talked to anybody actively doing Legion for quite a while.
Yeah, it's I think it's a little more. At least on Gaheris, it's sort of one of those encounters that people tend to avoid just because you can't really, um, get 20 people to go down to Darkness Falls and take it out. You definitely need to be more organized. You need to have, X amount of tanks, X amount of PBA for the ads, and it definitely takes a lot more organization. So I think in terms of creating an impulse raid or a spontaneous raid, I think it's definitely it's in its current state, it's made that more difficult. Um, but then again, um, maybe it's more designed around Yuan where they have more players available, and but yeah, I don't know. I think maybe a slight tweaking. Just I think he's just too resistant to magic damage right now. I think the rest of the dungeon is fine, but I think Legion might be a little. I wouldn't say he isn't too hard. I mean, the tactics are there. He's able to die, but I just think the fight takes a little bit longer than it normally should.
Hmm.
And Kuji has joined us in the Twitch chat. Hello, Kuji.
He'll
Um,
hear that in like a couple minutes. How much of a delay do we have for now?
I don't think there's any delay. Maybe a couple of seconds, maybe 30 seconds, depending on if I'm lagging or not.
Kuji, speaking of what we talked about earlier, that the application for the Knights program, Kuji is one of the people that I would encourage to apply. Um, I've always appreciated his point of view on a lot of things, and I think that that's a good way to point out that we're looking for people of all different play styles and personalities. Certainly, there's not a mold that we're after. If you think you have something to offer the game and the night program, I would really encourage you to apply. Again, that application is not out yet, but I heard rumor that it will be possibly next week. Is that true?
I believe it's actually sometime this week, if I am not mistaken. Maybe Baven will correct me,
You're right.
Carol will correct me, but I think it's
Well,
actually
this week.
sometime
I
this
guess
week.
it started today.
Yeah.
I could never get used to the fact that the week starts on Sunday. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah.
I'm this many years old. You think I'd learn something?
Well, I was a manager for a store for a while, so I'm dyed in the wool Sundays, the beginning of the week.
Nice.
But anyway, so the other thing that I was going to talk about in regards to Gaharis is I'm going to talk to this channeler here, and let's see if I can find it. He talks about battlegrounds, and just as a little tease, I don't know, I think Broadsword just leaves this in the game just to taunt me every time I talk to a teleporter, but it says, I will teleport you to either Molvik if you wish to test your combat prowess against other guilds. So I click Molvik, and it gives me the option to teleport to various portal keeps. Now, if I click it, it will actually just kick me to character selection screen. But so one thing that I guess it was Mythic at the time, or actually EA Mythic, I should say, had plans to do something with um, adding some sort of player versus player option to Gaheris. And I thought at the time it was a great idea, and I still think it's a great idea, and I have brought it up on the internal forums several times, and there's uh, seems to be a degree of receptiveness to it. I don't know if anything is going to happen ever, but I keep trying, and I think it's something that a lot of people would like to see, whether it be because they're Yuan players and they want to have a change of scenery, or it's Mordred players where they want that option where they can group with and fight against same realm, opposing realm, that kind of thing. Um, A lot of people who aren't playing right now just need an excuse to come back. A lot of Gaheris players um, play Wayne, and they would love to play their old tunes again, just to have that extra option. That place where you can PvE all you want and take on all the content that's available to you, and still have a PvP option. So that's one thing that I've been pushing for quite a while. Uh, and maybe people who are watching, maybe give me your opinion on that as well. Uh, but for now, maybe Mark, you can tell me what you think of that idea.
Well, I mean, I've always been a fan of trying to have some kind of a battleground on, on Gaheris that functioned well. Um, what what do you think about, or what do you think the community on Gaheris thinks about character transfers from Uwain?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the purpose of playing Gaharis is to PvE, and I think if a battleground was added, I don't think that battleground should be the focus of Gaharis. So, with that in mind, if there was a character transfer, um, I wouldn't want to see a full inventory transfer with that character. I think if people want to character transfer, that's great. They can keep their realm ranks, they can keep their levels, they can keep their champ levels. But I think there should still be a level of PvE that is required for them to join in. So maybe when they transfer their characters, their king's template gear, whatever it's called, could be reset, and they could start off with the free template and sort of work their way from there. Um, I I think character transfers would be a great idea as long as it's modified in some way. It's not just a full-on character copy. Because Harris does have a economy to a degree, and I don't want uh, a bunch of players who work hard to farm items and sell items and trade items and all that kind of thing to all of a sudden have the things they've worked so hard for to, be trivialized by, a mass transfer of all these items on people's uh, characters.
Yeah, makes sense. No, and welcome to Aliens, by the way. This should be his favorite podcast ever because we're doing the Gaheris focused podcast tonight. So that's what we're talking mostly about. And I know how he loves the PvE. um, anyway, no, but related to that, I agree. I think that it would be difficult because it's going to be impossible to, not impossible, I'm sorry, very difficult to stimulate the kind of player growth without some significant content update or general player influx to the game that would up Gaheris anywhere near what a character transfer would do. But then you really are wrecking part of an economy, at least for a short period of time. Even if you just are talking about players in Kingsgear, things are going to get just totally upturned by the sheer amount of players. People will be competing for these things again. So it's just kind of like a multi-barbed issue, and I absolutely, I could go either way with it. I just am curious what you think that the population thinks. Would they rather have more players around, like quickly, or would they rather see it build slowly and more, I want to say, not authentically, but yeah, more naturally.
I think what most people on Gaheris want um, are one of two things. They want more solo/small man content. They want to be able to do things when there aren't raids happening, and they also want more raids happening. So they want people leading raids. And one thing that I've always tried to do when I've been recruiting for my guild, and uh, trying to get people to play is to have someone who will lead raids and take the initiative. And because one thing that any Gaheris players knows is there is a lot more people subscribed when we have active raid leaders. So I think they would always want to see uh, raids happening on a regular basis. And I think when you give Gaheris something that entices more people to play, I think it will result in more people who want to start to lead raids of their own just so they can gear themselves out and get those kinds of things going. So I think a battleground would stimulate the population and sort of encourage more people to lead raids, which I think would help Gaheris players, the locals, if you will. I think they would appreciate something like that. And I think they would also appreciate the PvP option, just in case something happens like between, I'd say, 2010 to 2000, I guess 14, when the Darkness Falls expansion, I guess you could call it, was released. There was pretty much a full-on dry spell. There was really nothing happening, and I think that's when the population was hurting the most. So I think if we had another dry spell, I think the PvP option would sort of ease the pain of not having PvE content to participate in, new PvE content, I should say. I think the PvP option would sort of keep you entertained until something finally does come.
I agree. I think that's a better option. So if you're listening there, Broadsword, we could definitely boost the game there without a lot of ongoing interactive support necessary from transfers. If you would make Battlegrounds work for us, everybody would want to do that, I can guarantee you.
Yeah, and I think like I always argue when I try to push this battleground is that if PvP is always tweaked and balanced around, and things are changed, things are added, and generally when those types of things happens, Gaharis is completely unaffected. Nothing, we never see any new or interesting things because it was intended for a PvP or RVR mindset, and when we don't have that PvP option, we pretty much are left out of the content, so to speak, of that everyone else is getting.
Yeah, I agree. Let me take a minute to talk about what Aliens is talking about there, or ask what you think about Steam in general and how it applies to, or could apply to, Dark Age Camelot.
Well, I do know that it was greenlit. I don't know what the timeline is for when they're actually going to take action on that. Maybe they're working on it right now, but I don't think they have anything completed yet. So there's really not much for them to report as of yet. But as far as I know, it is something that they're working on.
Yeah, I definitely know it's something that is being actively discussed. I know not because of Dark Age Camelot, but because of another game that a developer friend of mine is working on, that there are certain criteria for putting it up there, for this, the health of the game and the state of the game, that they want you to, kind of like boxes to check off, depending on, I'm not sure how it works exactly, but he was saying that they had to work towards something, his game, before they could get the appropriate level of, not advertising, but I guess being visible on the scale or whatever it was. So I don't know if that's an issue, but we haven't heard, we won't hear what the state of that is. We've just heard that it's something that's been greenlit. So essentially, we know what you know.
Yeah, and I think, like the previous newsletter said about how they're working on the account center, I think that is probably one of the essential steps towards uh, integrating themselves with Steam. So I think that even though they're not saying, we're doing this account center for for getting ready for Steam, I definitely think it's probably a huge part of it.
I hope so. And honestly, I mean, I feel like we can say this for players too. I mean, the account center's been a frustration for people. I mean, I've even had my own share of frustrations with it. Um, it definitely is a major. It would be a major turnoff for new players. So the fact that they're totally revamping it here and so quickly um, is awesome. And honestly, personally, I would rather see them finish that before it really gets pushed onto Steam, because I'd hate to see people like try this awesome game and then be like, it's so frustrating to get going, I don't even want to try it. You know?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can see that with any game. Like I remember when I was hosting my own sort of modded Minecraft server, I noticed that the harder it was to install the mods for my Minecraft server, the less people that decided to play it and log on. Like there's a certain point where if something becomes too difficult to even just be able to log on, they just won't play at all. So um, when you have an account center that uh, is so difficult to even put your credit card information in or something like that, it's uh, it's definitely going to prevent new players or returning players from getting back into the fray.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think that's going to be an important part of the push. We've always kind of talked about, oh, there's no advertising this, advertising that. Yeah, Steam really is a great option for that, for the age of this game. I mean, honestly, like, I'm interested to hear personally, like, if any of you guys out there have any ideas about other reasonable methods of advertising, like what we could do to, showcase Camelot. I think Twitch is an interesting way to go about it. Certainly Steam. Are there other good ideas out there?
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that from the people watching too. But yeah, like you said, Twitch has definitely been a great advertiser for that. I know that for sure that when I've been streaming on uh, the official channel and when I've been doing the Gaheris stream, I've had a lot of people come into the game telling me that they started playing again because of the stream I was doing. They saw Gaheris and they got the itch, and it actually worked out great because one of the founders of my guild uh, had seen the stream too, and he actually reactivated because of that. So uh,
Wow, that's
things
awesome.
like that can sort of reunite the community in that regard. So I thought that was pretty cool.
And I want to take one more opportunity to mention for those of you who have joined late or
Oh
missed it
God.
last time, is this is our 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 Twitch for going through Gaharis issues for the most part. We are talking about other things that we're still continuing to encourage people to apply for the night program when that comes out this week. The application will be on the Herald, and I would encourage you to look it over and think about it and think about what you would like to contribute to the program, to the game, um, and certainly apply. There are several of you in here right now I think that could be great. And we talked earlier about having different focuses for the game. I know that there are, like Aliens is very into the stealther community, and it has been said in that community that we sure could use better representation by people that play these solo stealthers or small man stealthers all the time. I agree completely. Um, but this application is great. I feel like it highlights all the things we need to know as the existing program, and it gives you an idea of what we're looking for. So, that said, I'll let you move on, Ian.
Yeah. Well, there was one last thing I had on my list that I thought we could talk about, and it was about a post that the user Hugo Felix made on postcount.net. Um, his idea that he brought up a few months ago and then brought up just a couple of weeks ago was to make Gaheris free-to-play server and sort of make Yuan the premium server where you'd have to pay to play. And sort of his reasoning behind that would be Gaheris is something that hasn't been updated specifically in quite a while, and maybe just make the server free to play and give people an idea of what to expect when they're setting up their characters, gearing them out, and maybe eventually when they decide they want to try the RVR version, that they'll subscribe to the Yuan servers.
You know, I think that's an interesting segue into the whole battleground thing. If that were the case, if they did, if they were able to make just one server free to play in the game, and the battlegrounds thing was an option, at least it would give people a taste of what the RVR is like. That even though it wouldn't be the same, it would be similar enough that they'd have an understanding of it. So that could be a good aspect.
Yeah, it would certainly be interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I think I've never really been too much of a fan of the idea, but one thing that is a problem with free to play is just all the work involved to get that set up. And I think, like you were talking about before, if they did decide to do a free to play model, it would be so much work that if they decided to go through with it, it would probably be something that they would just do with the whole game and not just one specific server.
Yeah, I will say, there's obviously we're under an NDA and there's not a lot we can say, but the free-to-play option has been discussed. It's something that we've suggested over the years. It's definitely been looked at. It hasn't been ignored. And like I was saying before, I don't want to put a monkey wrench in it and say, oh, it's too much work, but I really doubt that they would go through the process of turning part of the game into free-to-play without doing it to the whole game. And I haven't heard any noises about that recently, but then again, it could have changed in the years since we've looked at it. It might be simpler, but it seems like it would be a lot of work to get off the ground, but that's just from my perspective.
Yeah, and one thing that Hugo Felix argued in his thread was that it may not be as much work as maybe we're thinking about. His idea was just to say anyone that has a Dark Age of Camelot account can log on to Gaharis without having to subscribe, and if you weren't subscribed, you wouldn't be able to log on Yuan, and if you were subscribed, you could, and it would just be as simple as that. A little Boolean or whatever that you put in the code that says
Right.
subscribed, you can log on to Gaheris but not Yuan, or not subscribed, I guess. You know what I mean.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, and I'd read that, and I thought that was, I just think I turned off in my brain that was even a thing, because thinking about changing the code makes me just scary. But who knows? Maybe that'll be a part of the whole account center thing, and maybe they're going to yell at me for even saying that might be a thing after they hear this.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Yeah, it's a possibility, and it would be great for someone like me. I wouldn't have to pay for my accounts anymore.
Right. Save a small fortune every month.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely, billing in general has been an ongoing discussion. It will continue to be an ongoing discussion, and I think that, wow, there's an interesting comment right there. We'll get to that in a second. Anyway, I just think it's, the conversation is a good one, and I would really like to pursue that in earnest after we have more nights involved, that we can get more direct input from the community in events and polls and whatnot discussing it. Returning Camelot player, I like to see that. There actually, little guy, if you go look on the Herald, there is a new walkthrough on the Camelot Heralds of, getting started that was just put together by some great volunteers.
Yeah, and like Alien said, all the UAN servers are pretty much all one server. If you need to, basically, if you need a place to buy a house, go to one of the preferred servers that is in the list. But pretty much it's all one server, one population. Um, the different servers are basically just different housing zones that if you're choosing UAN 1, you're choosing a more populated housing zone. If you choose UAN, 6 or whatever, you're going to have more options when you're you know, house hunting. Uh, so that's pretty
It should
much
be
the only
said,
distinction, if I'm not mistaken.
right? It should be said that you can search housing zones across the UANs. So if you buy a house on an underpopulated UAN because you want to get a better area for your house, you can still see and what is available for purchase on other servers. It's not like you're stuck on that one, and people will only buy goods if you're on the higher populated server like UAN 1. You can still see everything. You have to move to that server at the housing entrance, to go buy an item. But you can certainly shop just the same.
Yep. So one thing I wanted to mention one more time is just because we didn't have many people in the stream at the time was there is a new newsletter coming this week. Um, if you sign up, you'll get the latest and greatest. You can sign up by going to darkageofcamelot.com. There's a big bar at the top of the website that lets you enter your email address, and you'll see the new newsletter. And in the coming months, if you are signed up, you'll be able to receive some cool in-game stuff that they have planned for that kind of thing. So, and you'll get all the latest and greatest information in the new newsletter. So definitely sign up for that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really excited about that, honestly. I'm not just saying that. I think it's going to be cool. I like all the forward progress that is happening, with some of these revamps. Um, it's just great stuff that's going on. And I will say one more time, at the risk of being ridiculous, that I really encourage you all to consider, if you applying for the night program, if you think that you have the experience and want to be contributing to it. It will kind of explain as you go through it some of the things we're looking for. And don't be afraid to apply, and don't be afraid to hunt us down in game or on post camp boards or anything. If you have any questions, we're really looking forward to making this an even better experience for everybody.
Yeah, it's should be pretty exciting in the next few weeks to see who applies, who gets added, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that should be cool.
But again, I know this sounds silly, but I was going to make fun of you for standing here in the snow for most of the broadcast, staring at an encounter. But now I kind of want to go do it. I'm not going to lie.
Well, you might be able to find it in previous streams, but yeah, it's a pretty fun fight. For the longest time, people were saying that you had to hit him from behind and able to do damage, but I think that was sort of a myth, because when I started doing it with my guild, we didn't really find a difference in between our positioning when we were doing damage.
And to answer Aliens, yeah, no, at this point I believe it's just a night application, but we certainly will be. The process is not like put in an application and all of a sudden you become a knight. If you haven't been a part of the internal community for a while, or haven't at all, I'm assuming, granted this is my perspective on after the discussion we've had, that it's not coming from them. I think that there probably is a vetting period of going through the internal forums to make sure that we can have civilized conversations. You're certainly allowed to be biased. You're certainly allowed to be passionate. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying at some point we need to be able to communicate, and we want to make sure everyone can do that effectively before we throw them at the community as a representative. I am probably the worst example of any of the knights. I'm kind of an asshat. Oh, I said that. Um, but I mean, it's just I don't think it's a big deal. If you really, if you think that you have something to offer, I would just encourage you to do it, because they may say, who knows, they may say, yeah, we'd like you to be a part of these forums for a while, or we feel like we have enough people already that fit this play style, but we really like these ideas and we want you to be around. I don't know that they're going to say, oh, sorry, this is too much. In fact, I quite believe that they will encourage people to join the internals. So that's my educated perspective, but not an official word.
So,
But
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, it really is a very positive process. This is not an archaic thing that's going on. It's not like, not that anything has been pointless, but you know how things can get when they get stuck in ruts. This is a very forward-thinking thing that's going on with the way the game is moving right now, and the way the Ignite program is moving. So, I mean, it's more like if you're doing something positive and fun, and you want to jump on that, it's just going to fuel itself. So, really, you should be excited about it. I'm not just being, a fanboy. I'm really excited about it as a frustrated old stogie of a player. Like, I think it's a good thing for the game.
Yeah, I think so too. So one of the things that Carol thought we should talk about is login polls. What do you think? Do you think that's something that would be worthwhile? Do you think it is something that would uh, gather enough relevant information about possible things to do with the game, or things to do with the website, or whatever else?
Personally, I love login polls. I can't say with any certainty how much time it takes on their side to then do something with that data. But I will say that as a player, I always loved the login polls. It made me feel like they were doing something active in it, and I knew that they were listening to me, because things happened. Um, some of that is perception, and then some of it is just I know that great things came out of login polls in the past. So I really, really, really like to see that, you know, come back if it were something that were, reasonably feasible.
Yeah, I really liked the login polls last time I was playing, and they were uh, popping up when I was logging in. I think it will be a little bit more difficult to implement these days, just because a lot of people use the patcher bypass. But maybe when they do a new patch, maybe they should do the login poll, because you have to do the patcher to update to the patch. So I think that would be a great
Sure.
time to do a login poll. But yeah, I thought they were pretty cool, and like you said, when the polls happened, you definitely saw something come out of it. And they definitely picked one of the things that the player community decided on.
And Aliens makes a good point too. Um, that a lot of the input they get comes from the same sources. And a lot of the player base doesn't necessarily visit these sites or check social media or anything like that. But when you're actually taking a login poll of who is actually logging into the game and playing it, I think that's an important, it doesn't necessarily have to carry more weight, but it certainly should carry some weight as far as, what the community is feeling.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as a post count user, I feel like um, I think it's great that there's a presence of the developer presence on those on that website. But again, it makes you wonder: is this community that I'm in really representative of the entire Dark Age of Camelot community? I'm not sure if it is or not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's just, it seemed like it was a reasonable way to go about things in the past, but, given the restructuring of, and repurchase of the company, I don't know that it is set up like it once was. So I can't say, yeah, let's just turn that back on, because maybe it's more than that. But in my mind, I miss it.
Yeah, I think it was really cool. I definitely think it should be brought back, and you know, maybe not something that we'll see every week, but definitely something that would be cool to see, and it would kind of give you an idea as a player to see what the ideas that the developers are kicking around, and what potential things I would see in future patches as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we're running a little bit over our time here. Is there anything else you want to get at, Gaheris related, before we are
no,
done?
I think I had pretty much three primary topics that I wanted to talk about, and I think we went through them pretty pretty decently.
Sure. And is there anything else for you guys that are, you know, watching the stream? Is there anything else you want to talk about while we're here? Um, Personally, I feel like I should bring up something assassin related, just so I get aliens to yell at me. But maybe that won't work.
Well, as we
But no,
know,
in all seriousness,
that scouts, rangers, pretty much all stealthers, I think they're perfectly balanced, and nothing needs to be changed about them. No, I'm just kidding.
no, no, we kid, but it's one of those ongoing. It's one of the things I appreciate in people, actually. I like it when people take a stance on things in the game because they actually, you know, care. I was going to say something else that involved explicitives, but I won't. You know, I like it when, because it's a game, I'd rather see people like take out their frustrations through a game than in the rest of their life. You know, I know it's been that for me at some points. You know, where it's, my wife will say to me, she's like, "You need to log on and stab somebody in the face right now." You know, and it's kind of a joke, but it's kind of true. You know, it's a great outlet. You know, for understanding that, you know, we have um, not certain needs, but certain things that we want out of our gaming experience. And Camelot, certainly one of those, is the competition and the fierceness. You see that in the 8v8 community a lot. You see that in, I mean, come on. You can't even get in those discussions without people getting hot-headed. It's great. That's awesome, at least from my perspective. And the fact that those opportunities exist inside the structure of this game is something to be celebrated, I think, and not looked down on. I mean, we can have, you know, your happy guilds, of which there are many that have large populations and they do things together and they have a whole family thing, and we can have people that call each other names. At the end of the day, we know that we appreciate each other, you know?
So I don't know if you're watching the stream at all, Mark, but you said that you wanted to see the encounter done. Well, I have someone who invited me to their group, and they are going to take out Thrimson,
Awesome. I'm
the
so watching this
Jotun
now.
King. But anyway, oh, we have a hothead reporting in. No, I think
Yeah,
a
I mean,
lot of
that's
us, I
one of
think
the
pretty much, yeah, if you are a hothead, you should definitely apply to be a knight, because I think pretty much all of us are in one way or another regarding certain things.
Well, I think it's just, it's more like, I mean, for instance, the people that have shown up and spoken tonight, like, I have immense respect for, you know, these two guys especially. Um, the, you know, everybody has their own point of view. They have their own skill set. I had some concerns when we were talking about the night application process that we'd have too much focus on how much specifics do you know about the game, you know, how do these things work, and, you know, I think that's very important. Don't get me wrong. I just also think it's really important that the fun factor is taken into account. You know, why do we do this? You know, ultimately the math part of it is fun. You know, the Uber gaming is fun. You know, let's face it. But sometimes people are looking for something else, and I think that having all these differing points of view is just going to make the program stronger.
Oh yeah, I completely agree.
Well, the fumble procs, let's talk about that. The weapon procs, you know, we went back and forth about that quite a bit, where the fumble procs were. In my mind, the biggest problem with the fumble proc, well, both procs. The miscast proc didn't work right. Um, you know, now it's a little more functional because of some of the other changes that have worked, and I can't really get into too much of that. But the fumble proc, I was talking about the miscast proc just now. The fumble proc, I think it was really just a matter of, number one, making sure that people couldn't dual wield it Rangers
Yeah.
as like a guaranteed, fumble. And so, moving it from the offhand to the main hand made sense. And then, reducing percentages, adjusting percentages. I really think that's probably an ongoing discussion. I think what we were hoping for with these new weapons was that they would be very useful, perhaps in some ways the new desired weapon, but not so over the top that it was like, how are we ever going to have anything else, So I feel like it is, not to be redundant, but it's an ongoing discussion. I mean, it's like, I feel like they're better where they're at. I'm still interested to hear people's experiences, and that will change based on the kind of gear that comes into the game, the kind of play styles that are created. I think it's not something we can stop looking at. Yeah, and Kuji makes the point there that what I wasn't going to get into was that you could absolutely bypass the miscast. And then it made things obnoxious, like Purge, like Mock. It was really frustrating in ways that people hadn't been frustrated in a while. Even though the dynamic existed, you could be fumbled in the past and that would happen. You could be a spell miscast in the past and that would happen. But it happened so rarely, and now it's happening all the time, and people were noticing it, that it became frustrating. So yeah, there were a few things like that that contributed to why it was changed.
Yeah, and Aliens is asking about the leather DF chest. Did you know what he's talking about? I'm not very familiar with that particular item.
Oh, what you mean before or after? What are you talking about specifically? Okay, yeah, and that's actually been bounced around a little bit, so I don't know that how it's physically functioning now. I never liked that proc either, but it's hard when you're look at it like this for a second. Um, when you're looking at a proc, we have to consider: do we want more of the same procs, or do we want to try something different? And if we want to try something different, is something going to be powerful? Is something going to be overpowered? Is it going to be pointless? And I think this was one of the things they were just trying to see if it would work. Um, if you're really disliking it, I would encourage you to continue to submit feedback about it, although I'm sure they've heard more than enough about it because I know I've seen it on lists. But, it's just one of those things where they were trying something different and probably wasn't a great idea. But that's just from my point of view, not speaking on behalf of anyone else. I think I lost Ian with that one.
Yeah, I'm just making sure my group doesn't die.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm actually glad I get to watch this.
You have half my attention.
That's sweet. I feel like this chat today was the population um, in the Twitch stream was representative of the population of Gaharis compared to the Wayne servers. Sorry. In case you missed it, we've been talking about Gaheris all night and things that we could do to encourage it being a better experience and encouraging players to go partake in the community.
Yeah, well, people always ask, what's the population like on Gaheris? And usually I say anywhere between 40 to 50 people, and if you do a /who right now, it's 55 people on right now, so maybe not people, I guess a few of them are bots, but yeah, it's slowly getting better and better. I don't know what's changing, but uh, more and more people are starting to log on, and I I think I can attribute it to probably a big part of it would be the Darkness Falls patch, and another part of it would be there's a lot of people taking the initiative to lead raids. So yeah, I think it's getting better every day.
Yeah, and I'm going to comment in a comment that was just made. Why would you encourage small population to further segment the game? Paraphrase there. Yeah, I understand that frustration. That was a frustration for, you know, quite a few people about alternate rule sets for quite a while. And one of the reasons why, you know, we've never done a relaunch server or anything like that is not wanting to segment the population. We saw what happened a few times with different experiments. But basically, it's an existing population. This Gaharis has been around forever and ever and ever and ever, and hasn't had a lot of support. And it really is a different dynamic that exists. You know, the infrastructure is there, the community, you know, is there, has been there, could be there again, with very minimal takeaway from, you know, from Uwain, if you're a hardcore Uwain player. Personally, and this is all I'm speaking is personally, I'd really like to see us get back to a point where, you know, you could choose to play that server because your group was full on Uwain, or you just felt like it, you know, this couple days, or, you know, some Gaheris players felt like they'd made enough, you know, if friends on Uwain that they would want to come, you know, do an RVR raid on the Uwain server. You know, so it was more of a unifying the population rather than segmenting it, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you can definitely see that in the Gaheris population today, where I'd say probably more than half the players here all have Uwain characters that they all occasionally play, or you know they play Uwain more, and every once in a while they hop on Gaheris. Uh, I'm sort of the opposite. I mostly play Gaheris, but every once in a while I hop on Uwain and I solo on my minstrel, or I join my friend Tuld and his crew. So yeah, I think I think Gaheris can definitely be a great alternative to Uwain players for them to play, and I think Uwain can be a great alternative for Gaheris players to play. I think if you play $15 or you know pay $15 a month to play Dark Age of Camelot, um, you should be able to enjoy to full extent both servers.
Yeah, and I really feel like there's been, I guess it's not directly related, but I've been really impressed lately with the amount of consideration that the developers have had for multiple facets of the game, for small man content, even for solo content, for group content. I would really like to see them expand that to the PvE server content. Um, I see it as a part of the game and not separate from the game, I guess. I see it as a part of the overall Camelot experience and not like a totally separate world.
Yeah, and I think as more players sort of set aside their PvP or RVR elitism, they sort of kind of relax and realize that PvE isn't as bad as they had made it out themselves to be. So yeah, I think, and I and the reason I say that is not just out of my own ignorance; it's out of personal experience. I for a long time, I would I would only PvP and or RVR, and I hated PvE, and I never wanted to play it, and I hated when I had to do it. So when I finally had an open mind and my friends were playing Gaheris and they got me set up here, I found that I actually enjoyed it quite a bit.
That's cool. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to get taken off here. My daughter just got back from the park and she cannot be contained apparently. So I want to thank everyone who showed up and thank you for discussing Gaheris with us a little bit here today. And again, for like the 18th time, bring up the team lead application coming up this week. Please apply if you're thinking about it. And if you have ideas for things that we should talk about in the future on these podcasts, feel free to hit us up anywhere, either on post count or in game. Hopefully, at some point, we'll have a way to contact us through the Herald directly, although you can make feedback there. I mean, contact the Knights directly. But I will say, regarding signing up as Knights, one of the things that we'll be able to focus on, like if tonight you were like, oh, we talked about Gaheris entirely too much, it's not my thing. The idea is that we will have enough Knights from enough different points of view that we could have events related to all kinds of game style options. So, consider that as you're applying, that you might want to be a part of leading a relic raid, being an 8v8 leader, being a small man leader, and having everyone participate from your point of view. So, that being said, thank you for listening to me babble. Thank you, Ian, for hosting us, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Mark, and I hope you saw Thrimson die to the mighty SM's Death of Souls spell. Yeah, so I think that will pretty much end the stream slash podcast there. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Yeah, I think that's pretty much one thing I'd like to say just one more time is don't forget to sign up to the newsletter. There's all sorts of cool stuff that you'll be able to, all sorts of information you'll get from that. And in the future, you'll have some cool in-game stuff that you'll be privy to if you are signed up. So that will be in the coming months. And I think that's pretty much it for me as well. So yeah, thanks for watching.
Good night.
Good night.